All right, so going over his discoveries, I think we just should just start from the beginning, the first one, which is Noah's Ark. So
Mhm.
everybody knows about the story. Everybody has heard about his discovery. What does the Bible have to say about it? What does it say about its location? What kind of details can you give us?
Well, God told Noah to build a boat, and he told him, gave him the dimensions. Now, the dimensions are in cubits, which the Egyptian cubit is, elbow to fingertip, depends on who's king. Egyptian cubit's 20.65 inches, about the same size as mine. Here's my theory on this. Noah and his family and probably everybody before the flood were probably 15 feet tall or more. So when God gave the dimensions to Noah, it might have been in some other unit. Measurement units change all through history. In old days, they'd say, well, it's 42 strata to go to London. What on earth's a strata? So if Moses, he didn't write Genesis, but he edited it together from 10 eyewitness accounts. He probably at that time, 20 or 1500 years after, no, Moses was 2,000 years after the flood. He probably changed it to cubits because he went to school in Egypt, and that's what he was familiar with. Like people in England, they're more familiar with meters rather than feet and yards. So I think the numbers, 300 cubits long, it may be what God told Noah, but it may be God told Noah some other way to measure it, and Moses transcribed it into the modern, I would say 515 feet, because which is perfectly fine to do that. Anyway, so God told him to build this boat. He told him to cover it with pitch. Now, Joseph and I just came back from Los Angeles. We spoke Monday out there. They have La Brea tar pits. I did a lot of research, brother. There are tar pits all over the world where oil and tar bubble up out of the ground, and they call it pitch. Maybe you remember Jed Clampett and the Beverly Hillbillies? He was shooting at some food, and up through the ground come a bubbling crude, oil that is. Sometimes there's just oil right near the surface, and the first oil well they drilled, they only had to go down 67 feet and start pumping oil. I lived in East Texas and Longview, Texas, 5 years. We had, just in 1 acre, there were 28 oil wells. They couldn't pump it out fast enough. Now, sometimes they drill really deep, but they hit oil all over the world. So I think the pitch is not a problem to get pitch, which is kind of like a tar substance, and you coat your boat inside and out with that, and it hardens like tar. Then God told, now we don't know where this took place. We know where Noah landed. The Bible doesn't tell us where. I think it was probably Garden of Eden, which would be, Lenox, Alabama, where we live. So then Noah built a boat and only had one door, and the window it just gives one dimension. It says make the window in a cubit. So most people think that means a cubit by the whole length of the boat, which is logical to get airflow in there. Then Noah was in that ark for over a year. Now, it only rained for 40 days. But the water kept coming up for 150 days because the fountains of the deep broke open. If you get my video series, number 6, I go through lots of details on that. $50 for 18 hours. You can watch it, return it, get your $50 back. I used to loan my videos out, brother. I learned immediately. Christians don't steal, but they borrow and never return. So you buy it for $50, return it when you're done. But video 6 has all the details and stuff on this. And then it says the ark landed in the mountains of Ararat. Not on Mount Ararat. It landed in the mountains of Ararat. I think it's very unlikely that it would land on a mountain. Tell you what, next time you're in the bathtub, put a sponge in there and try to bring your knee up under the sponge and make it land on your knee. Very tough. It'll float off to one side instead. So I think if the mountains are lifting up, like it says in Psalm 104, at the end of the flood, the mountains lifted up, the other places sank down, and the water ran off. How fast it lifts up determines how fast it runs off. If it lifts up slowly, it runs off slowly. So the earth is busted up into plates. It still is today. They're called fault lines all over the world. And so at the end of the flood, the mountains arose, the valleys sank down, and the water ran off, leaving Noah's Ark stranded high and dry in the mountains of Ararat. It's most likely that it would get caught between two mountains where the water's running off gently. Other people think it's on the mountain. And there's an argument between creationists about, where was Noah's Ark? Well, it's not worth fighting over to me. But I believe Ron Wyatt found it, documented it. And Mary Nell Wyatt, who's been on your show, she's south of Nashville, about 30 miles in Spring Hill. We were up there about a month ago. She's got all Ron's discoveries in her basement. They got a museum that's incredible. You got to stop there. She has pieces of Noah's Ark. It's covered with pitch, tar, dried tar. So yes, I think it is exactly what the Bible says. It really happened. And if you want to get into how they get the animals on there, that's another long story. But sorry, I'm talking too much. Go ahead, brother.
No, that's fine. touch a little bit on that because obviously you can't bring the full grown animals.
Well, God told him to bring two. God didn't tell him to bring anything. God said two of each kind will come to you. He just stood there with the door open and they came to him. Didn't have to go get nothing. People say, how did the kangaroos get there? That's assuming the earth then was like it is today.
Yeah.
I think the Bible says in Isaiah 45 that God formed the earth to be inhabited. That's why he made it. Well, today, 70% of our globe is still underwater.
Yeah.
10% is deserts. 10% is ice caps. Only 3% of the earth is habitable for mankind. 3%. So what we're seeing is a junkyard compared to what Adam and Eve saw. It was habitable from pole to pole. I happen to believe before the flood, the earth was not tilted over this 23.5-degree tilt we've got, which causes our seasons. It was probably perpendicular. As it spins around, goes around the sun, everybody gets 12 hours daylight, 12 hours darkness. It's eternal springtime everywhere. You could put a garden at the North Pole or South Pole. Then because of the weight of the water coming to the surface and the surface crust sinking in, that would upset the balance. And while it's spinning, you to get a spinning top and hit it with a rock, it'll wobble around for a while and come out spinning at some new angle. Doesn't matter. We happen to come out at 23.5 degrees. So I think the world before the flood was just perfect weather all the time. So the animals were everywhere. Kangaroos were probably in Noah's backyard all the time. Now today, they're only found naturally in certain places, but you can't take that and apply that to pre-flood world. If the pre-flood world was mostly habitable, mostly land, it just describes seas in the Bible, not oceans, and rivers, but it would be a very different planet, lots more. And there's a website called baraminology.com. Baraman is the Hebrew word for kind. God said they'll bring forth after their kind. That's all anybody's ever seen. You know, cows produce cows and dogs produce dogs. There are no exceptions, none. You wish to imagine something different, you and SpongeBob go have a party. Just imagine cows are related to pine trees. Yeah, that's what they teach too. So I don't care what they believe, but they shouldn't call it science. It's a religion. Yeah. So Noah took two of each kind, and this baraminology website says there's probably 8,000 kinds of animals that had to go on the ark. And again, Noah would bring babies. That would be common sense. You know, why would you bring big elephants? Bring babies. They eat less, they poop less, they sleep a lot more, they're tougher. Joseph, you found, 7 different ways animals to either hibernate, estivate, torpor. We'll get a list of all that someday. What animals that are not in captivity, but more confined, you don't need as much energy, you don't need as much food. You're not running around the woods all the time. So they're running around the ark maybe. And then you bring babies because after the flood's over, they're going to live longer to make more babies, and that's why you're bringing them. He did not have to bring insects on the ark. The Bible clearly says, bring all those in whose nostrils is the breath of life, all those on land. Noah didn't bring fish on the ark. Yeah. They had plenty of water, outside. He didn't have to bring bugs. Bugs survive a flood just fine. Go someplace where there's been a flood. When the water goes down, walk out in the mud. Tell me the first thing you notice. So you're surrounded by a bazillion bugs that are going to bite you, right? So after the flood, the bugs would repopulate, no problem. They could survive on floating log mats and dead bodies and stuff like that. So let's assume 8,000 kinds. Atheists would say, he can never get all those on the ark. I say, for heaven's sake, guys, you believe all the animals in the world fit in a dot smaller than a period on a page. Don't they? Not only that, the whole world. Not just all the animals, the material to make the animals, but the whole world, all the stars, everything fit in a dot. That is so stupid. How anybody believes that with one functioning brain cell blows my mind. You'd have to go to college for years to be that dumb to believe the Big Bang Theory, all fit in a rock. So, yeah, the Bible says all the animals are on that ark. They're in the ark for a year. That does not mean the whole world's flooded for a year. They came in, God shut the door. They sat there for 7 days. Nothing happened. Then parts of the world, as the crust of the earth is flexing up and down, parts of it might have only been underwater for a few weeks. How long would it take to kill everybody? How long can you swim? So I think probably the ark being in the ark for a year does not mean the world's flooded for a year. Okay?